Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our to the Women in Science Office seminar. Today, we have the honor to have here Susana Malcorra. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Susana was born in Argentina. She's graduated as an electrical engineer, and she has worked in the private sector for 25 years, first in IBM, and from 1993 for Telecom Argentina, in which she became the CEO of this company. In 2004, she joined the United Nations World Food Programme in Rome as Assistant Secretary General and Chief Operating Officer. In 2008, she led the Department of Field Support for Peace Missions based in New York as Under Secretary General of United Nations. In 2012, until 2015, she was the chief the cabinet of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon at the United Nations. After this appointment, she was elected as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Argentina, position in which she stayed until July 2017. As you can see, Susana has a long experience not only in the business sector, but also in diplomacy and international relations, in which she has had to lead with complex situations, such as the conflicts in Darfur, South Sudan, and Democratic Republic of Congo. Because of all of this, all of her work, she has received many different awards. For example, la Gran Cruz del Mérito Militar con Distintivo Blanco from Spain in 2011, the Global Leadership Award from United Nations Foundation in 2011, and the Gran Cruz de la Real Orden de Isabel la Católica from Spain in 2016, and the International Women Forum, the induction to the International Hall of Fame in 2017. She has just published her first book with title Pasión por el Resultado, el liderazgo femenino ante las grandes decisiones. I think we are going to hear a lot about her talk that has the title of The Leaderships in Times of Change. Susana, the stage is yours.
Hello, good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks to Maria for inviting me. Thanks for Wise to giving the framework to this presentation. I'm happy to see that we have male colleagues sitting here, because this is going to talk. I'm going to talk about leadership at large, but of course I'm going to put a little bit of focus on what I see as the contribution women can make in leadership positions. And as I speak, I have to tell you, I am not doctorate on these matters. I'm a bit humble being among so many experts and real top people in the arena you work on. I'm just a practitioner. What I'm going to tell you is my learning from life, my living through my many years in what Isabel just described was my career, but also my personal life as a contributor to what I see as the development of leadership. So don't expect big breakthroughs, just normal people thinking, which I believe is central to define leadership. Leaders are supposed to be normal people, and this is a very uncommon thing. We often see leaders seeing themselves as not normal people, and that, I believe, is a problem. I'll talk about that in a little bit. You have here already my work life description, my career. It has been an odd career because I started as an engineer and I finished as the top diplomat of I finished so far. I don't think my career has finished, by the way. As the top diplomat of my country, and before that, as the chief of staff of the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, which meant to be at the kitchen of diplomacy of the world, where the power really is struggling to define next steps in the world. And I've never thought when I started my career that I was going to end up where I ended up so far. And that's my first message on leadership. Be prepared for change. Be prepared to adapt and adjust. Be prepared to take the opportunities, to seize the opportunities as they come to you. Because planning is good. And I always hear, particularly in the US, that you need to plan your career. Yes, that's true. You need to have a little bit of planning. But you also need to be ready to decide changes as they come your way and as you see they fit that moment better than what you had planned for that moment. And this is particularly important for women to adopt, because women tend to be more of embracing a plan and following that path that was sort of decided at a certain stage. We need to dare. We need to be ready to sail the waters of change. And the title of my I don't think this is a conference, this is just a talk with you, is Leadership in Times of Change. And why I decided to qualify leadership with times of change. Because precisely I believe that we are living in the world a period that is very unpredictable, where we really do not know what is going to happen 5, 10, 15 years from now with what we do, with what we study, with the environment we live in. And having the flexibility to adapt and to change, for me, is the first prerequisite to have a successful life and to have a successful career and to eventually become a leader. So plasticity, the capacity to adapt, the capacity to adjust, the capacity to read the tea leaves and say, well, this is something new, this is something different, but I should consider it, is very, very important for each one of you. Let me tell you a couple of examples, personal examples. As I said, I'm trained as an engineer. I work on the private sector for 25 years, first in IBM, and then in telecom. Even though I was not doing engineering jobs, I was in an industry that required the understanding of an engineer. It was very useful to understand the nuts and bolts of what I was working with in order to move up the ladder in my career. So it was sort of a natural flow. But then in 2001, some of you may be aware of this, I hear there are some Argentinians in the center, so I may have some Argentinians in the audience. We had a big crisis, big crisis in Argentina, not the only one, but it was a big one. And one of the results of that crisis was that the economy was pacified. At that point in time, we were tied to dollars in our economy. And to make the long story short, for the purpose of what I'm telling you, Telecom Argentina, which at the time was the third company of Argentina, I became the CEO of the third largest company of Argentina, found itself in a situation where the revenue stream was divided by 3 because the pesos were 3 to 1 to dollar at the time, and our commitments were to pay our debt were in hard dollars. So all of a sudden, all the indicators where you measured the quality and the sanity of a company went to hell, because we could not afford to repay the debt we had, because our income had been divided by 3. So that meant immediately that we had to go to Wall Street. Telecom Argentina is listed in Wall Street, so it's a public company. We had to Wall Street and announce that we were going to go into Chapter 11. Very technical word to say we were bankrupt. It sounds nicer to say Chapter 11, but the meaning is we were bankrupt. So I had the privilege to do all of that, to go to Wall Street, to go to London, to go to Tokyo, where we had taken our debt commitments and say, listen, to our debtors, we are sorry, but given the current situation, we are not able to pay back the debt as envisioned. So we will have to restructure, and we will have to see how eventually we'll pay you. It was not a nice moment to go through. And a few months later, after I did all of this, the board decided that it was time to have a CEO with a financial expertise. When I tell you this story now, many years after this happened, it sounds reasonable what the board did. I mean, I was an engineer. I had no training to really handle negotiations of the sort that we were going to afford. But at the moment that happened, it was a really big blow for me. Essentially, I was fired for good reasons, no doubt, and all the explanations I can give you. But when I was told that they were going to look for a new CEO, the feeling was that I was being fired. And that was, in fact, what happened. And everything I had worked for in 10 years, Telecom Argentina was the result of the privatization of public telecommunications in Argentina. We constructed the whole network. We built the whole telecommunications together, and competing with Telefónica, which was the other operator, was gone through the waters. It disappeared. So it was an amazing, amazing crisis for me. It was a frustration. It was a very difficult moment to live in, to live through. And all of a sudden, I thought that, okay, this is enough. I've done what I wanted to do in private sector, in business. Now I want to do something different. I will do something in the NGO sector, in the social sector. I mean, I have proven myself that I can do what I wanted to do in business. Let's do something different. Out of frustration, I want to do something that contributes to society in a different manner. And so I told my friends in the headhunting business if they knew anything, because they, on top of that, there were not many business opportunities in Argentina either, no? And all of a sudden, it came a message that there was a UN organization, the World Food Program, based in Rome, that was looking for a Latin American woman. I didn't know about the World Food Program. I never in my life thought I would work for the United Nations. I didn't understand why they were looking for a Latin American woman. Sounded very odd to me. So first thing I did was to look into what the World Food Program was. And it looked like a very interesting institution. It is the largest humanitarian institution of the United Nations. It serves in 80-plus countries, in the most horrible places you can think of, where people really are in dire need of life support because they will die out of starvation, and there are many of those places. So I said, why not? And then they explained to me that the reason why they were looking for a Latin American woman is that in the UN, you need to have geographical representation in the leadership positions, I didn't know that. That's how little I understood the UN at that point in time. So they told me that that's why it was Latin America. And then they also said that they were trying to achieve gender balance at the top, and they needed one more woman to achieve that balance. So I said, why not? Let's go for it. And as the minute I said that, the headhunter said to me, listen, you stand no chance, which is very appealing, no? To hear that you stand no chance. I said, why not? Because this is a political appointment. The top appointments in the UN are all political. And being a political appointment, both Brazil and Mexico, largest countries in the region, will want to go for it. And their governments are going to bet on it. I apply as Susana Malcorra without support from my government. And I said, why not? At least I will get it to travel to Rome, just to be interviewed. It's always nice to go to Rome, So I said, let's go for it. If you know me, and some here know me, the only thing you need to say to me is very, very, very difficult for you to get it. Because that means I'll go for it all the way, which I did. And 6 months later, the executive director called me and said, if you're still interested, having lapsed so much time, the position is yours. And in fact, the Brazilians and the Mexicans had fought for the position, but the executive director decided to choose me. So why am I telling you this? Because it was a huge change. It was getting to a totally different world, different codes, different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching matters. And it was hard to take the decision in a way, but at the same time, it was the opportunity to reinvent myself, to be a new one. After the huge frustration of having been fired, after having been very successful in what I did, still being fired, this gave me the chance to open a totally new door and a totally new window. And I went for it. And it was the most amazing experience I had. The one to really start from scratch when I was 49 and say, let's learn everything. Let's decodified what I had in my head that was hardwired in my head, and let's start again with my experience, which of course was of help, but let me give the opportunity to restart, and also the humbleness to recognize how much I do not know. So I did. I started in World Food Program as one of the deputies. This was September 2004. Comes December, Christmas time, and everybody leaves because, in an international organization, it's typical that people will go home to celebrate the end of the year. Even though people may not be Christians, they take the advantage of the time to go home. So they left me in charge. And I said, I think it's a little bit unwise to leave me in charge after only 3+ months being here. And the famous words were the following: don't worry, Susana. The last 2 weeks of the year, nothing happens. December 26, 2004, probably you do not remember the date, but something very important happened, the tsunami. So I was called that morning very early, very, very early, around 5 o'clock in the morning. I get a call from the office saying, listen, this has happened. At that point in time, it was uncertain the level of severity of the tsunami. So I went immediately to the headquarters, to the situation center, which operates 7/24. And first thing I was impressed was how many people were already there. The ones who were left, we all gathered together, and we started to understand the sheer size of the devastation, which was incredible. And all of a sudden, 3 months into being in the World Food Program, I led the first response to the tsunami. Of course, I had 25 years of experience. I didn't come from scratch, so many things came back to me immediately as natural to take decisions. But of course, also, there were many new things that I had to combine. And this proved to me that deciding to accept change was the best thing I did, because in this incredible new situation, I was able to contribute with my own background and backlog of knowledge, but also I was able to understand something that was very, very important. And that is the fact that I was used to talk about results in the private sector. In fact, many of my friends in the private sector said to me, well, you are going to get bored in the UN because everything is so slow. And I learned in a minute that results that were so important on a quarterly basis in the private sector meant here that in a minute, in a second, a life could be saved. So I learned a different meaning about what a bottom line result is. And it was like rediscovering a new world. Long story short, again, the tsunami was horrible. The numbers of lives lost were horrible. It was the natural disaster that affected more countries simultaneously. And the operation that WFP led was successful in terms of what WFP could contribute. And once the whole staff came back, I moved to my support position within the response. But I was able to handle those first few days, the first week, 10 days, so that we could really respond immediately and action and move people from all over the world, because they were now in their homes, directly to the places where they could really add value. So again, it is critical that we give ourselves the opportunity to take new chances, in new opportunities again in as they come. There is a tendency, and this goes particularly to the women sitting here, there is a tendency for us to try and tick all the boxes and see if we can fit perfectly all the requirements of the job. Be careful with that. Men tend to think of themselves as ready for it. Give yourselves the chance to give it a try. I'm not saying to be responsible. One needs to recognize that the basic requirements are needed. But it is important also to recognize that when you change to a new position, the suit should be maybe 2 sizes larger than what you need. You feel a little bit uncomfortable. Also be careful when you feel that the suit is too tight. It's time to move on. So the first thing I have to say is be ready to change, particularly in times of change, because you don't know what is coming your way, and as much as you might think that you have planned your whole career, that is not the case. There is something external to you that will surprise you, and be ready for that surprise. The second thing is be passionate, and I'm sure you are passionate. People in science normally are very, very passionate about what they do. But I think one needs to be passionate about life, a little bit beyond the narrow mandate that one feels has in the specific area of expertise or development that one is working on. Passion is the engine that really makes things happen. And when I talk passion, I don't talk passion in an emotional sense. I talk passion about that fire that makes you want more, go farther, try harder, try better. That passionate that gave my colleagues in the Work program the mandate to call the day after Christmas, no matter where they were in the world, to say, where am I needed? I'm heading there because I know that being there makes a difference. So the second message is, in times of turmoil, in times of instability, having that fire inside will help you sail through the waters, because you clearly have a sense of purpose that takes you beyond what you are doing today and gives you that certainty that no matter how much things are changed, you'll get there. So that's the second message. Give yourself the opportunity, recreate yourself, reinvent yourself, do it with passion. The third thing I want to share with you in talking about leadership, but in talking about life, as you may see, all the things I'm saying here apply for our life, refers to empathy. One of the things I find more disturbing these days is that more and more I see lack of empathy in leadership. And this applies to political leadership, and not only to political leadership, to leadership at large. You can only lead by understanding people, by understanding their wishes, by understanding their fears, by understanding what motivates them, what is that really stops them from moving forward. And you only do that by putting yourself in their shoes. And that's empathy. Listening. Leadership is a hard job, and some may decide not to want to be leaders, and that's fine. But if you are really looking to take leadership positions, it doesn't come easy. It's hard. It requires hard work. I always like to refer to Picasso when somebody asked him, how he got his inspiration. He was so inspired to paint and to do the things he did. And he said, inspiration comes after a lot of work. So it's not that it knocks the door and you wake up and, no, you try and try and try and you get better. Same happens with leadership. And work, hard work, and empathy are very good associates. Why are they very good associates? Because being empathic to people, but investing yourself in working with people, in really dedicating the time to listen to them and to adjust and adapt whatever plans you have when you lead, is what makes the difference between really achieving a supreme objective or just getting there without excellence. So all of this is effort. All of this is transpiration more than inspiration. All of this is really wanting it, but working for it. It's like when you see the athletes, the very good athletes. None of them will do it without the incredible effort of everyday training and training and training. I like Messi. He's from my city town. So if you are from Real Madrid, I'm sorry. And he always says, he wasn't good at those direct hits that he now does so beautifully. He just trained for it. The guy is good, no doubt, but he wasn't good at all. And he just trained and trained and trained. And all of a sudden now you see the magic of some of those free kicks that he does that are so beautiful. I love football, being an Argentinian. And it seems like magical. There's nothing magical. There is huge work. So I'm sure this is nothing that I should emphasize with you because, again, in the field you are hard workers. But I just want to say that tenacity is an essential piece of leadership. Then creativity. That's the other aspect that one needs to add to it. And particularly in times of change. Because when you start to develop yourself as a person and as a leader, you start to get certain tics, you start to be in a certain way. You are good at this and not so good at that, so you emphasize certain aspects. You really put focus on certain questions. When the environment changes, it's often the case that those abilities of yours, those tics that you have developed might not be the best fit for purpose in the new environment. So creativity is essential. Not only is essential for you to manage the situation, but it's also essential, again, to reinvent yourself, to find where are the areas that you have not yet explored, where you can change and really adapt and adjust to the new environment. And again, for the younger ones, and I see some very, very young here, that new environment is going to be a reality many times in your lives in the near future. I started to work in a working environment where it was thinkable that you could work in one single place for the whole of your life. That is totally unthinkable today. Totally unthinkable. In fact, not only is unthinkable, it's counter. You think about it and you say, well, how odd. You want to stay in a same. That clock is going to run faster in the future, much faster. And it's going to run faster because technology is making breakthroughs that are unthinkable today, and because the reality of the way the society and the institutions evolve is one that makes things change faster. So the notion of adapting yourselves to the idea that nothing is permanent is fundamental. The only permanent thing in your life is change. And as much as that can create fear, because there is always a certain fear to the unknown, and most of the time change brings a lot of unknown, you should prepare yourselves to the idea that with your passion, with your hard work and commitment, with your resilience, and with your creativity, you will be able to master the change. The change will not master you. And that, to me, is essential as you become leaders, but it is also essential as you live your lives without necessarily being leaders. It's fundamental to be ready for what comes, for the unknown, and particularly for you at the stage in life you are in, is a necessity because it will happen, and it will happen quite a few times in your lives. So all of this is to tell you that there is no magic solution that I could say, this is the formula to become a leader. You construct a leadership, you construct yourself as a leader, starting with your decision that you, yes, want to take leadership positions, which is a decision, and I insist here. It doesn't mean that everybody has to go for it. Some may not want to do it. But once you see yourself occupying leadership positions, the rest is very, very hard work. It's very hard work with a lot of people. It's very hard work with yourself. It's work with passion. It's not dull at all. It has to have that fire that inspires. And it has to have the notion of what are your principles, your values that distill your leadership style, that distill what you are in leadership. So that's the other thing that is critical for leadership. As much as you need to be ready to adapt and adjust and understand the changes and accept the changes, there are certain values and principles that should remain there. And should something happen that the compact you have with the place where you are, with the group you lead, is broken, you need to decide whether you continue or not, because your principles are the only thing, principles and values, I will say, are the only thing that is unnegotiable. I always refer to Unamuno, who, among many other things, wrote that the only right he gave himself is the right to change his mind. And it's very interesting because often we think that that idea is my idea and I'll go for it all the way. I will go through mountains and walls and whatever. And all of a sudden, it's good to change ideas. Give again yourself the opportunity to, in that new environment where you are, recognize that some of the ideas are old and need some polishing, some adjustment, some change. What you can never negotiate is to change your values and principles, because then you are not yourself any longer. And that, to me, is one of the main messages that I will leave to you as a leader that I've been trying to go through the journey of my life, having achieved positions in different places, in different situations. I never negotiated on those values and principles. And sometimes that meant that I left an organization. And I did. And looking in retrospective, now I recognize how significant that decision was. I didn't think it was that significant when I took it, but it is significant in having shaped who I am and what I can do and say standing before you here. So, in a nutshell, go for it. Be absolutely passionate about what you want to do. Passionate in a sense, as I said earlier, that is not emotional. It's the passion to invest yourself to do what you want to do. But also accept the notion that this is not an automatic pilot situation. Your life will change many times, and you need to be ready for that. And in doing so, you have to accept the notion of reinventing yourself, rethinking yourself. This I have done in my life. This is I want to share with you. There are many other things we could talk about, because in my life I've been exposed to, as I always say, I have gone to the places that travel guides don't show. I know Africa up and down, from north to south to east and west, but I don't normally know so much of the capitals of Africa. I know really, really deep into the field what Africa is. Same has happened with Syria or Afghanistan. And there I also learned that in the end, people are people. And those principles and values that I referred to that are not negotiable, essentially are the same principles and values that everybody has. So let's build on that. Let's work hard on that. And let's finish here with the lecture, and let's open up for conversation, because what I really enjoy is hearing from you, getting your questions, and trying to address all of them. And if I cannot, I will tell you I don't know. Thank you.
What a masterclass in leadership. Thank you. Question?
One needs to break the ice. Don't tell me. Okay. Oh no, there is one there. There's Maria. Sorry, but
Well, it's a really pleasure to hear you. It's really, really inspiring. I just want to add, okay, to all the things. I think it's on the line. It's in everything that you said. Just I'm talking about my experience. That is also that you during all this way that you are saying us. Is also that you are always learning different. I mean, learning from changing the course of your professional career. You are learning for values, for reading, taking courses. I mean, this is something that have changed completely different from the past. Now people should keep learning until
continuous learning is.
Continuous learning and also to have the capacity to be curious, no? The curiosity should be to develop the creativity, no? I mean, this is something that I just wanted to add.
Definitely. I mean, it's implicit in
Yes,
what I said, but I'm glad that you emphasize it. Indeed, having the wish to keep your eyes open to what is new, and then to understand what you don't know in order to handle what is new is part of it, and that is the secret for learning. Maria.
Yeah, you have been in a position where you have seen the world, right, with all its inequalities and also different characteristics. So how do you see the position of the women having this view? The view of power is a view of men, right? I imagine the majority of presidents of the countries are men. The powerful decisions in the world are taken by men. But how do you see that this will change in the future, including also women? I mean, which is your view on that? If you can tell us something, and maybe we don't know. I don't know.
I wish. First of all, the experience of being Chief of Staff of the Secretary General is an amazing experience, because what you do being Chief of Staff is you run the organization. I mean, I was responsible to run the UN. He was the political figure. He was the one who everybody saw, and I was doing the great work behind. But and I loved doing that. I mean, I didn't have any problem. I enjoyed it. But what was more significant is that you were able to sit at every table where decisions were taken. And very interesting, those tables essentially were tables where men said, no question. I was in the UN 3-4 weeks ago, and I learned two indicators that are very, very interesting. How long will it take with the current tendency to get to parity in all positions in the world, political, private, 50-50, it will take until the middle of the 21st century. And how long will it take to get to power parity and income parity? Somewhere in the 22nd century. 23rd century. So somewhere in the middle of the next century, we will get to parity. Somewhere in the century after that, we'll get to full power and income parity. Those are indicators that have been put together after analyzing. This is worldwide, no? We are talking worldwide. You can imagine that there are very different situations in different parts of the world. There is no single country in the world, not single country in the world that has achieved full parity. Not even the Nordics, the ones that we know are much better off. So clearly, the question of gender parity, gender representation is central to address some of the issues of the world. And in my view, it's only possible if we have proactive policies. I mean, positive encouragement is absolutely needed. Otherwise, the time it will take to get there is too long. And this is not a matter, this is very interesting. It's not a matter of justice only. It's a matter of economic sense. The development of any country that does not have full representation of half its population is not full. You look at economic factors, and it's clear that this is the underrepresentation of half the population has an impact in economic and social, of course, development. So I've seen this in the power center of the world. I've seen how little women are represented. It was very typical. The Secretary General will meet during the General Assembly week. That's the week where the world goes to New York. 193 countries are represented there. Most of them at the highest possible level is a chief of government or of chief of state, head of government or head of state, or ministers, and the Secretary General will meet with almost them. We used to have 120, 130, 140 meetings during those 10 days, 14 meetings per day, and I manage all of that. And I sat beside the Secretary General in all of them. And we had a game between the two of us. I will take note of what was the representation of women at the table. So every now and then, when we had an average, he will pick on whoever came next and had no women, or probably had a couple of women at the extreme of the table that were taking notes. And he will say, listen, and show the average and what has happened. So that's a reality in the world. It's a reality in all sectors, I will say, and it's something that we need to change, no doubt. Yes?
Do you think that this underrepresentation of women in leadership has to be as well with the managing kids or like another type of life? Because you have to be passionate to be in a leadership role. And sometimes women has to choose between family and leadership. And that's something that men has not in the brain. They don't feel in the same way that we do, that they have to give up so many things for the family or to see the kids grow up. And I don't know how could we evolve with that until men doesn't feel as fathers as we do as mothers, let's say.
Well, you raised quite a few questions in one. Let me tell you something about myself that I didn't say in the introduction. I'm an only child. My father was a low middle class worker. My mother was a housewife. And probably because they didn't have an option, they had all their expectations on me. They were convinced that I was going to be a professional, the first professional in my family, in the whole family, that I was going to have a family myself, and that I was going to be successful doing everything. And that, to me, is the key driver of what I am today. First, they instill on me the notion of a self-awareness, the notion of I can do it. There was no doubt in them that I could do, and I could do everything. And by the way, I will do it in a way that was top class. It's hard, you know. I mean, my parents were hard on me in that regard, but they really, really made me who I am. Then I been married for 42 years to a man who, without any doubt, feels himself equal to me as I feel equal to him. And without, even talking about it, it is what it is. When we got married 42 years ago, in fact, it's 41, it will be 42 in January, I'm advancing a little bit. Before getting married, I told him I was not going to take his last name. In my country at the time, this was a no-go. And he said, I don't care, that's fine. My father-in-law was not so happy, I have to tell you. So this shows to you that it's true. As long as there is no sense of shared responsibility vis-a-vis the family, there is a much larger load on the shoulders of women, no question about it. I don't believe one needs to choose. I think one can do both. I can tell you, you need to find the right partner. I was lucky enough to do it. But it's also true that it's not only what one personally does, it's what the public policies are. And one of the things I'm working hard these days is on women's issues. We have created a group of women leaders that are really, really working hard on gender and multilateralism because, and I'm stepping back for a second here to tell you this, some of the biggest advancements that have been made on the question of gender and women leadership and empowerment are now being pushed back because there is a concerted movement in the world of conservatism that says that gender rights go against family rights. So this is big pushback, and I'm working on that. But I'm also working, trying to advise governments on how critical it is to really establish laws, establish public policies that recognize the need for family support, not for women, for family support. And then having all kinds of big and small messages that can make a change. Last thing I will say to women in particular, but also to men, the way you educate your children makes a difference. So also not only work for today, trying to get your share of what you want to do, but also invest for the future, educating your children on equality. And don't stand up and take his plate. Just let him do it. Yes?
Thank you for the talk, Susana. I think there was a very strong movement in favor of abortion rights of women. What do you think about what is the current situation in Argentina of abortion rights? What is your opinion, and how do you leave that in the government?
Well, yes, there was a big discussion about the law on the right to have a legal abortion. I'm pro, no question. I respect the ones who believe that that should not be the case. Having a law passed doesn't mean that you have to have an abortion. It's that you have the right to have an abortion. And the fact is that women do have abortions without a law. So that the lack of a law does not mean that you don't have abortions. In fact, the only thing that happens is, particularly for poorer women, is that they are more exposed to abortions that lead to death. That's the reality. The society in Argentina, and that was proven, was divided on it, and it's a highly politically charged issue, and the result was that the law was not passed. I really, really feel very strongly about the need. It's a right. Nobody should have an opinion about what I do with my body. That's my view, which at the same time is fully respectful of those that, for religious or whatever reason, believe differently. They will not take the law. They will just do differently. Yes?
I'd like to get back to the issues, the features of a leader or leadership. So thank you very much for your talk. So you mentioned different things that I have here. So flexibility, passion, right? So you have the creativity and I guess determination. But the one I personally like the most and the one I agree definitely is empathy, right? And with empathy, I guess it goes also trust. You didn't mention that. So now I have a question about your team. So can you tell us about your team, how you assemble the team, what do you look for? And then also how do you balance this trust, empathy, and how do you try to motivate them to be also, I guess, their own sub-leaders if they come, because you have a position of high responsibility, so I guess you also lead people that have high responsibilities. So a little bit on your team and also ways to strengthen these ties.
Well, empathy, when I talk about empathy, I was talking about not only reaching out to others whom you have to work with or relate to, but with your own team to begin with. You cannot have a team without empathy. My own experience is I have worked with many different teams, and often I have not been able to choose my teams. So it's not that I always decided that my perfect team will be such and such and such. What I have always managed to do is to have a couple of people in certain positions, because it is important to articulate your message and then to get feedback in a manner that you can recognize that is a truthful and sincere feedback. So that is what I have done. I give a lot of space, and this was learning for me. Let me tell you a little bit about this. When I first started working, and as you by now imagine, I'm a hard worker, I'm a very dedicated person, I felt that I could really make a difference. Until I found sometime not far from that I could not do everything. And I started to recognize the notion of delegation. They delegate. It was very hard for me to reconcile with that notion, because often I had to delegate on people whom I felt will not do it as well as I did. And so you have this temptation to do it yourself. It's absolutely the wrong approach. You need to give yourself the space to train, explain, accept that some will not do it right, will fail. But on average, if you enlarge your capacity to do things from one that you are the one, even if you think you are the best of all, and then you have 10 working with you, the multiplying effect that has is amazing. So you have to learn to delegate. You have to recognize that people will do it differently, sometimes not better or worse, differently. But what is important is to achieve the result, is the bottom line. And in mobilizing, you have to empower people. There's no other thing. You have to listen. The one thing I've learned is to listen a lot to criticism. Normally, when I choose people, I choose people who are ready to criticize me. And my God, some of them are. That's very important, to have your feet on the ground. No matter how high you have a reach. I always said jokingly that I was able to keep my feet on the ground because of my husband, whom I already spoke about, and my son, whom is absolutely clear about his mind and will tell you. So he will say, this soup sucks. It's the same one you have done in the past years, but this one sucks. And I'm just using the example of the soup. He does it with things that are more meaningful because it gives you the chance to have a mirror and see yourself in your strengths and your weaknesses. And that is fundamental. One of the worst things that can happen to a leader is to lose touch. And we see that very often in leadership positions. If you lose touch, you're done. And regarding trust, no question. Trust is, empathy is all about trust. I've written a book that is in Spanish, so the ones who don't speak Spanish cannot read it. That is called Pasión por el Resultado, Passion for the Bottom Line. Here it is. And what I say, it's a book about personal stories. It's very easy to read. It's 10 chapters, give and take, each one with a personal story in some point in my career. And I talk about empathy when I meet with the rebel leader of one of the movements in the Congo, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And he was killing people in the very place where we met. And I sat with him for hours, and we spent 40 minutes talking about his family. And that was just to develop empathy, just to understand him. So that's what you need. I know people need to go. We have passed the time, I guess. There is one more question. I don't know whether we should take it.
We as scientists try to advance science and technology to the best of our abilities, but it seems to me that your skills with technology only started your career, but what actually brought you or made you a leader were your skills with people. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, no, there is no doubt about it. I mean, you can only go as far as you bring people with you. And that applies to scientists too. I mean, I'm not a scientist and I have not dedicated myself to research, but I assume the multiplying effect of having a good team behind a subject you are researching on makes a big difference and has the chances to achieve a good result are much higher. I know often scientists tend to want to do it themselves. Well, wrong approach. Wrong approach. Is having many eyes on something always makes it richer. And I assume that is the case when we are researching some of the topics that I cannot understand but are so important to us as mankind. So being able to recognize the other is central for anything you do in life. Okay, I think it's time to go.